Brad Hinkle, Emily Cassie. The other two directors are not here, Colin and Alec, not here, right? So here we see two very different films, obviously. So let's start by talking about The Sheriff of Good Times first. Okay. How did you first find out about the subject? How did this all come about?
So I just went to a bluegrass jam in my neighborhood in Ditmas Park, and I met Sheriff Bob, who was right there. I met him there, and I just loved him as a person right off the bat. He's really genuinely cool, interesting, fun guy to be around, and I hadn't made a personal project in a while, and I just got his email and emailed him and said, hey, let's do something. And as we continued with the project, it turned into more of a collaboration than a film that I was making about him. It was a film that we were making together about the bluegrass scene, using him because he's such an interesting person as sort of the vehicle for that. And yeah, he was a producer for television for a really long time, and turned out that he had been wanting to kind of re-enter that world in some way for a long time, and so it was weird how it happened, but yeah, it's cool.
Have you made music docs before?
Yeah, I mean, I shoot quite a bit for music documentary things, but it's usually more commercial stuff, and this was like, something I wanted to have more say in how the edit turned out and everything, and yeah.
Very cool. All right, congrats. All right, so moving to Emily. So Emily Cassie, the director of A Girl Named C. Let's first talk a little bit about how this all came about. So I guess the family, as I understand it, contacted you.
Well, actually, I was also at a bluegrass jam, and that's really the story. It's not at a bluegrass jam. No, I was working for the Huffington Post at that time. I'm a reporter and journalist, and I cover a number of human rights topics, abuses, conflict, internationally, and sexual abuse is one of the topics that I had covered. And I got an email one day. I get a lot of emails from different people wanting to share their stories or alert me to something that was happening. And I got an email about this family and their daughter, C. And I was really struck by it because they described these drawings that C had used to kind of come forward to her parents. And I was put in touch with them, and I started Skyping with C and with her parents and getting to know them. And right away I realized that this was not going to be a journalistic endeavor. It wasn't going to be the kind of work that I usually do, because the story couldn't be corroborated, and because she was 12 years old when we started speaking, and they weren't going to get anything out of coming forward in the news. It would be a blip, and there was no way to kind of give it the weight that it would need to be a news story. But C was already working on her own film, and I was so blown away by her and how she was coping with her trauma that I just felt that I needed to help her tell her story.
You get so many, you're contacted so often by people as a reporter. What made this particular story stand out to you that you said, this is the one that I really want to turn into a feature film?
Well, I think it chose me. Like, I don't think I thought this was going to be a feature film. In many ways, it held on to me, and I was pushing against doing it, but I felt a responsibility to her, and I think I was just so moved by the fact that a kid could articulate so eloquently and so profoundly exactly what it felt like to have your power taken from you. And I'm a survivor of sexual abuse myself, and I've spoken with survivors all over the world. My first film was on the Rwandan genocide, where I was spending time with a lot of women who had suffered just terribly violent sexual abuse. But I had never heard a little girl talk about what it was like, and it just resonated, and I just couldn't walk away because I knew what it was like not to feel heard. And as we know, with the conversations concerning Brett Kavanaugh and Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and the Supreme Court hearings, we know what it sounds like to hear a woman who has experienced something as a child and had this really suppressed for her whole life, and then in this moment come forward and talk about it. And C is Christine Ford, right, in some way at the age of 12, but actually able to come forward. And I was there to hear her. And as much as this was a film about, wanting audiences to see her story, the exercise of making the film with her was probably even more important for me and for her.
Let me give an opportunity to the audience. Does anybody have any questions for either of the directors? Yes?
The film that was shot earlier in childhood, who shot that? The mother? The film when they were little kids.
Yeah, that was shot by her parents, their home videos, that we used a lot of their home videos, and we also was shooting a lot of footage herself, and that we weren't there for at all. But throughout the process, when we were there, when we weren't there, before we even got there, she was shooting a lot of that, and so we were using a lot of that footage.
Yes.
Is her own separate documentary coming out, or was this all part of it? So one where she's like interviewing the people at the end?
Yeah, so it was kind of a documentary within a documentary. There was a bit of a kind of meta layer in it. So the kind of reveal is that all the interviews you were seeing, except for really the parents, were by C. Like, she was the one doing the interviewing. So the film is kind of her documentary in a way, and we incorporated a ton of the footage that she was working on. She's continued to work on her own projects, but she also has kind of moved on, which is great, and is doing a lot of other things. She's volunteering with horses and therapy, and she has a lot of her own kind of science projects. She's very much planning on being a veterinarian. She taught herself German. I don't know. She's very precocious and has a ton of things going on, and this actually is no longer the priority, which is fantastic, which hopefully means that this was an impactful enough process that she felt she had really, dealt with it, and as much as it will continue to be a part of her life forever, as we know, it's not the most important thing, and it's not what defines her.
Yes?
I noticed that in the documentary, her face was not shown pretty much for the most part. I just wondered, as a director, what was the message behind that?
Yeah, there were two methods to the madness of that choice. One was that when we started filming, she was 12. And though we wanted to give her a voice, we also wanted to preserve her choice not to have her face on the internet associated with her story of abuse. And that was a very tricky decision of how much do we show. She was very eager to put her face on camera. Her parents were comfortable with it. It was actually our choice because, I remember when I was 12, when I was 13, I would make decisions differently than I might now, and we wanted to in some way preserve that choice so that if someone one day types in her name, the first thing that comes up isn't necessarily this documentary. So that was the kind of practical decision. Artistically, though, there was also kind of a point to it, which was that, it doesn't allow an audience to try to analyze her face to see if she's telling the truth or not. It forces you to enter into her perspective. Whether you choose to believe her story or not, you're kind of forced to see the world through her eyes. And then the other thing artistically as well is that, and I say this a lot, C is in every girl. It's not just a girl named C, it's a girl named A, B, D, E, F, G. There's a girl named C in every room. And so it was important to find a way to make her in every girl, and artistically it helped to kind of let the world be seen from that kind of forced perspective.
Any other questions? Okay.
So I'm assuming as a goal you want this to get out. have an audience, to have an impact on people. How are you going, is there an approach, a science to the approach? I work with children, so I know I can just foresee so many parents being like, no, this is not something that we want our kids seeing, but it's there, it's a thing. Is there any sort of method?
Yeah, so our priority is to get this into schools. So it's a really good question. That is the priority because we might not want to be talking about it, but it's happening pervasively. So that, there has to be some sort of confrontation with the education of children and sexual education, consent education. So we're working with, we're going to be working with distributors who are in the kind of educational space, and over the next year that will be kind of the main priority, and I'm sure we'll come up against many obstacles to that. But C made a very good point to me a long time ago, and I kind of follow this ethos, is that I said to her from the get-go, a year before we started filming, a lot of people are going to say you're too young to tell your story, you're too young to be talking about this. And she said, well, I would tell them I was too young to be raped. And for me, I was like, well, yes, that is the response I will now give people. So that's our plan.
I just want to ask a question to Brad and Emily. For those who are trying to make films, obviously getting them made is very challenging. What were some of the difficulties in getting both your films made? The challenges from financing to production. What were some of the challenges that you faced? We'll start with Brad.
So, yeah, it was weird how this worked out, because actually the way that I was able to put the time in is with the help from Bob. And so it was really a team effort between I, and Kat, who was also in the film. She was the associate producer. So, it was micro budget, tiny. I used my camera and I, employed my friends who used their cameras. And I think one of the biggest challenges was just filming in the spaces that we were in, extremely dimly lit, bars with, no room at all. Like in that Mona's scene, there was a camera literally on the bar and somebody behind the bar filming that scene while a bartender was trying to do his job. So that was interesting. But yeah, I think I'm extremely, extremely bad at the financing aspect of filmmaking. I'm learning a lot about that every day. I think my advice would be to, if you have an idea and you're worried about funding, just go figure out a way to film it on basically nothing. And you'll figure it out along the way. You'll get better at the financing thing as you go. But it's more about getting better at the filmmaking thing first, I think.
Emily, what were some of the challenges in getting your filmmaking?
It was all very difficult. This was a personal project for me, so it wasn't part of kind of my everyday job. So I was finding ways on the side to work on it. And we mostly did crowdfunding and private donors. It was a very hard film to get grants for because of the subject matter. People were really nervous about the idea of a 12-year-old talking about their assault. And we hit a lot of walls with that, and so eventually we turned to crowdfunding and private funding to get it made, and probably not quite the same, but was on a micro budget as well. It was tough. It was very tough when it's a personal project. It's not a blockbuster commercial film. Trying to get it seen and made is tough.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, my next project is now a crowdfunding venture, because I learned quickly that, you need some funds, but it's really, really hard to get grants. It seems like there's a lot of them, and there kind of are, but there's so many filmmakers trying to get films made that the crowdfunding space is a pretty incredible place. And if you have something like really focused in on a niche audience, people really want to see films get made. So
yeah, I think we have time for one last question from the audience. If anybody has a question from the audience, Okay, so all right, so I'm going to wrap it up with one last question. You just mentioned your next project. Do both of you have any other? Well, you just mentioned what's your next film, and Emily, do you have any other films currently in the works at the moment?
Sorry. My next film is called Empire and Eliza. It's about a team of breast cancer survivor dragon boaters, focusing on one woman in particular who passed away in the middle of filming. So it's a dedication to her. Her name was Eliza.
This is a documentary.
Okay, short documentary that is coming out in April. Yeah.
Okay. And Emily, are you working on anything else right now, or just?
Working on many things that are not feature docs. I'm the director of visual journalism at the Marshall Project, which is an investigative news magazine. So that is my full-time gig, and right now I'm finishing up a very long immersive web documentary on immigrant detention in America. So another really uplifting topic for you.
Okay, and real quick, if anybody wants to see your films, is it going to be having another screening, or is there a social media site where they can follow you on, or website, or anything?
We're A Girl Named C on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. We have a number of screenings coming up. One this weekend at the New Jersey Film Festival. We have a couple coming up in California, another in Cleveland. So there are cards out front, so you can check out our website. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Brad, any screenings coming up?
Mine is on Vimeo, so you can
All right.
check it out now. But it is playing at the New Haven Film Festival and other film festivals as well. But yeah, it's online.
Okay. Very cool. Well, congratulations, and thank you all. Thank you.